Hey everyone. I am so glad you're here today on the Blessings podcast. I've got another interesting life to explore with you today, and I want you to meet Alex Sylvie. Alex ran with a tough crowd growing up on the dark streets of Chicago. It was a hard life, and he endured considerable traumas, including shootings, drugs, murder, and abuse. But he overcame his difficult beginnings and went on to become a professional angler, winning awards for his fishing talents, and followed the path of success as an entrepreneur and businessman. He's an inspiration who serves the world by helping others to overcome their challenges as he did. And no matter how tough you have it, you can make something of yourself and you can contribute good things to the world, not in spite of your adversities, but because of them. Sometimes it's hard to see why difficult things happen, but there's always a lesson, and often our life's purpose is revealed through the darkest times. Alex knows that you can not only find and see that silver lining, but he also knows how to use it and wear it as a cloak like a king. Here is Alex Sylvie. Welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me. Beautiful introduction.
Thank you. I'm glad you're here because you have an important message to share. So let's go back. First, just give us a little taste of what you're doing right now in your life.
Okay. Currently, I took some of my life experiences and turned it into a professional career. I'm a life coach. I cover a lot of different areas. My three cores in my business is mind, body, and spirit. I think those are the ones you got to value the most to just personal growth in general. Man, it's been a great experience. I'm actually approaching my second year here in 2 months, so I'm very excited.
So great. And I love people who just want to serve and help other people. That's really where my inspiration comes from as well, wanting to help as many people as I can. And so I always find there's very good reasons why people come to that place when they get to a point where they know that they need to get the message out to help others. So let's go all the way back and tell us, where were you born?
Yeah, Chicago, Illinois, inner city, a neighborhood called Humboldt Park.
Humble Park. Was it humble?
Uh, and yeah, it was humble. It has its good and its bad. Any major city, it was a dominant Puerto Rican neighborhood. So there was a lot of community there, great food, but also there was a lot of gang activity, a lot of gang wars going on in that neighborhood at that time, especially in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what was happening with the gang wars? What kinds of dangers did you face as you were a child?
Oh man, drive-by shootings, constant drive-by shootings. Yeah, just a lot of fighting, a lot of gunshots, drug dealers out there on the corners, things like that growing up.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, we couldn't stay outside past night. Like before the sun was going down, we was called to come back home.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was definitely a pretty dangerous neighborhood in the early 90s. Still is to this day, just getting a little bit more modernized now, pushing that stuff out of there a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If you think back, can you come up with a very early, even your very earliest memory in your life?
Oh
What's
man,
the first thing you can remember?
playing basketball on a milk cart in the alley.
Oh,
Yeah, like in our neighborhood, when you was like 5 years old, you was able to play outside with the big boys and play sports. And they had pick up baseball games all the time where you throw like a rubber ball on the wall and they have a box and then you play ball. But one of mine was like I love baseball, but basketball. I remember taking a crate and knocking the bottom of the crate out and then hammering it on the street light in the alley. And then we would put a little board. And if we didn't have a board, we didn't put a board up there. And that's how we played basketball in the inner city growing up. If you had an actual physical basketball rim, they would have stolen it. That was a way of being able to play and it will stay up there. But then you also got a chance to like really get your shot down really good. But the pickup games, I think that was my earliest childhood happy memory that stays with me to this day.
what did you love about it?
Oh, the community. Kids nowadays don't play outside like they used to. We used to all go to the park and you would meet the kids down the street, the next door neighbors, the other kids on the other side of the block. and just playing sports, just being kids, having fun.
Mhm.
Sometimes those things will get broken up because a gunshot would come around. But at that time, like the parks was okay. It was a little bit safe. Like now they're not safe at all. But that was the fun part growing up, was just being able to have that community where the kids would go outside and we would just play until we couldn't play no more.
Mhm. And when you were super little, 5 years old, and you were doing that, did you find that with the community aspect, the older kids were taking care of the younger ones?
Yeah, you had some of the older kids taking care of. I had an older brother that was 5 years older. I was always around the older crowd. And actually, sometimes the game bangers in the neighborhood would come and play with us. And I think that was their trick, the way how they could lure us in and recruit us to get into the
Yeah.
game. They'll grab us and when we was a kid and give us a little pacify, some candy when the ice cream truck would come by, stuff like that. But they will participate in some of the sports with us and come to the park and get to see us. I think it was more of a recruiting thing for them though at the time.
Yeah. Were you aware of that when you were that little?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think you grew up pretty fast living in the inner
Mm.
city. And that was one thing, like my dad educated us like very young. He was like, hey, we couldn't wear a certain type of clothes. It wasn't really about the colors out there, but it was like name brand. He didn't want us to have those type of things out there to cause that attention. But he also said, hey, don't tell nobody where you live and things like that when we got old enough to be able to walk outside on our own and not have like our parents' supervision.
When you were very little, I know you also had some trauma in the family, and I know that your mom went through some dark times. Can you talk a little bit about that when you were super little?
Oh yeah, it started 8 months old. My titi got murdered. It was a really devastating murder, raped and murdered. And I was in my mother's room at that time. And man, it's crazy because we just went to her grave site like 2 months ago. But yeah, it was something really hard for her. And like I actually could feel that pain that she went through, which was very interesting, even though I was in the womb. And then fast forward
Yeah.
3 months later, she was going through a lot of stuff, a lot of stress. I think I actually came out 2 weeks later than I was supposed to because of the stress that she was encountering. They never found the actual killer. So there's never been no disclosure, and it's been an unsolved mystery. It's been like 37 years now.
Wow. So when your mom was pregnant with you, her sister was murdered.
Correct.
And so this created a big generational wound for you.
Oh man, it almost destroyed the family.
Yeah. Was it something you felt in your family as like a weight as you were growing up?
Oh, definitely. Because that's what separated the family. My parents ended up separating before I was 5. And a lot of that had to do with the things that went on after that trauma. And even her family, her immediate family, they were so broken, they almost fell apart. The only thing that was actually sticking them together was my grandparents on my father's side. They had this everlasting love that was just they kept the family together. They'll
Mhm.
call them and treat them like their own. So that was a big thing for the family. If it wasn't for like my grandfather and my grandmother at the time, I don't think my mother's family would have lasted that long. There probably would have been another death in the family, probably suicide. There was a lot going on during that time.
When you were little, the time that you were born until you were 5, it seems like it was pretty rocky in your family. Do you remember at all how your mom was? Like, do you have any stories that could illustrate that she was feeling sad or struggling?
Oh yeah, she definitely was going through a lot of like post-traumatic stress. There was a lot of
Mm,
crying. We would see her locked in the bathroom crying at times.
mm,
One time when I was 3 years old, I was coming downstairs and she was committing suicide. And I was like trying to stop her. And my dad came in like sliding like a baseball player at home plate. And he like grabbed the knife out and she was already on the third cut. And that was 3 years after my aunt had passed away, was murdered. So that was like 3 years later. And she was really going through a lot of stuff. And I think probably a year, if I could remember, it was probably a year after that, my parents separated. And I didn't see mom for a little while. I can't remember exactly how long it was, but I remember not having her there, and my dad was raising us, and it was three of us at the time, three boys.
Okay. So she was really going through a depression.
Yeah, I was her best friend, and she was the one that had to identify the body, and
Mm,
you couldn't really identify it. The only way she was able to know that was her sister was the birthmark on the side of her body. And they actually went to the house, and the house, it was like seeing like a horror movie.
they took her to the scene of the crime to
Well,
identify.
she actually went to her house not knowing that happened.
Oh my gosh. Did she discover her?
No, the body was already gone.
Okay.
Yeah, the body was gone. They found the
Wow.
body in the trunk.
Oh my gosh. So
Yeah,
she went to her house looking for her, came upon the crime scene.
yes. And then it
Uh,
was a couple of weeks later, they gave her a call to see if that was
mhm.
her.
Oh my God.
It was very interesting. My cousins on my father's side, some of their in-laws, some of our in-laws on that side, was the detectives on the case.
Wow. What a connection.
Yeah,
Mm,
it made it actually a little bit more personal because of that. And I remember growing up too, parents used to, like, my dad would go upstairs, guys, like we had an attic, and that was our room. And we used to like peek down and put our ears out, and the detectives would be over there. It was always a hard thing for my mom, especially early, like later on, my dad used to tell me, man, that changed everything.
yeah. Yeah. It changes your life. And she wasn't able to recover from it right away.
I don't think she still has the disclosure, to be honest with you, because she wants justice.
And she has to figure out how to go on without it.
Yeah, I think she does, but it still hurts her. Like even when we went recently to her gravesite in Chicago, you could tell she was like, this is the most important thing to do is to
Mm,
go there and put flowers on the grave. And it started raining, but
mm,
we stood out there anyways, and was like,
yeah.
give it some time.
Wow. What a heavy thing to carry with you from birth.
Oh man. I didn't realize it until my mother gave me a baby book. And I really started looking into every month I was born. I was listening to the songs that were making me dance more in her stomach, or I was kicking more. And then, like, when I was born, they also kept record for the first year. And man, it was, I forgot what month it was, but it was June, around June, I think it was, or January, one of those months. I was like a little depressed, and there was some things going on. And I started really like calculating that out after journaling while I was going through some of my stuff. I was journaling a lot. I'm like, man, how come I fall into a depression around this time frame? And then I asked
Mm,
my mom, I'm like, when did this actually happen? And she told me the date. And I knew it was my 8-month time frame. And I was like, whoa. And it was, yeah, January was that time frame. And I'm like, no wonder why I still have a little bit of a depressed, like emptiness time, because I was in the room while I was getting developed. Like I was pretty much almost ready to come out.
mm-hmm.
But I witnessed that pain, that crying,
Yeah.
that heartache,
Yeah.
that even like I have this like certain heart now because of it. And like when I see like women go through certain type of domestic violence or
Mm-hmm.
abuse, I'm highly protective of that. And
Mm.
I think that comes from being a part of what had happened.
Yeah. Because when you are 8 months in development inside the womb, you're hearing things, you're experiencing the things the mother is experiencing. That's really strong. And the fact that you have an actual physical sensation in your body of depression, you get a physical depression during that time when that trauma anniversary comes around, is incredible.
Yeah, they say it's like it stays in your spinal cord from what I'm understanding. So there's
Mhm.
like a part
Nervous system.
of
Absolutely. Yeah. So
I'm
what
I'm
kind of things
still,
do you do to help you get through that period now that you're aware of it?
oh man, journaling. Sometimes even talking with other people about this certain scenario that have went through either similar experiences or that are going through an experience that can't heal themselves on it.
Yeah.
I found that healing somebody else actually heals me as well.
Yes.
I do a lot of journaling and I'm always out in nature. So I keep myself grounded around that time. And prayer is, I think, one of those things when you seek that forgiveness. And I even pray about forgive the person that did it. And that's
Yeah.
like a hard thing to do, but sometimes you got to pray to your enemies. I don't think my mom's got that strength yet, but I know
Yeah.
I do because of the different situations that I've been through in life. I've learned how to forgive. And once you carry that, like you let go of that weight of forgiveness and just surrender it to either a higher power, whoever your higher power it might be, mine is God and Jesus. And it helps me tremendously not go through that pain. But I'll write, I'll journal at times and doing those times.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Wow.
affect me as much as I think it affected me more when I realized what had happened because I was like, man, I didn't know about this.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. That's why it's so important to go back into your story and look at these things, because we don't realize how that the things that have affected our parents' traumas, our grandparents' traumas, are living in our bodies. And we may not understand why until we go back and take a look. And that's amazing that you've been able to identify that and help yourself to work through it. And it probably helps your mom a lot too.
Oh yeah, I think the journaling is the key because you
Hmm.
can go back. And
Hmm.
especially if you're so consistent with it, even if you're not, and you just journal doing times when it was something like you need to vent on paper,
Hmm.
you just go back to it and you'd be like 2, 3 years later, you're like, whoa, like my
Yeah.
mood was here and there. And it helps you like it's like a roadmap of how you could balance your emotions
Yeah.
in the future.
It is. It's a roadmap. And every time you go back, you see something new.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's hard. And I know that it must have been super hard for her also living in that neighborhood still where the crime took place in the danger zone, that she may not have been able to cultivate feelings of security after that. And then how did that come through in the family?
It actually, I think my parents, they eventually got back together within a year or two later. That drove them to get out of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
I know it pushed my dad really hard because he wanted us to get out of there before high school.
Okay.
And he did it. He made that happen. We left my freshman year to Texas, and dad bust his tail to get there. He
Wow.
did not want us to go through living in the inner city,
Yeah.
especially during that time of what was going on.
Yeah.
Plus, we're minority. I got family that's all different kind of colors. Like my older
Yeah.
brother, light skinned, I'm dark skinned. And it's really like when you're a Puerto Rican in that neighborhood, it's like the statistics are like, you're going to join a gang.
Mm,
You're going to end up in that lifestyle. So dad just pushed us. And I think if it wasn't for all the stuff that happened so early on, they I think they took that pain and was like, man, we got to push harder on this because we do not want our kids to be in like this statistic. And
hmm.
our cousin David, that was the actual son of my titi Judy that passed away.
Mm-hmm.
He was messed up. And
Mm.
I don't even think therapy could help. It was so hard because his father was investigated. Everybody was
Wow.
investigated in this crime. It's unsolved mystery.
Yeah.
But that's what was great about the grandparents that I had. They had so much love and we used to always have parties. So those people was always around. So it was constantly uplifting. Uh,
Mm,
and that was the healing thing
yeah.
that was really good. But I mean, we got out of there.
Yeah.
Got out
So
of
I know some other things
there.
happened to you as you were little before you got out. Um, did you get involved with gangs?
Okay. So the mentality, the mindset left with me after Chicago. We was starting cliques at
Okay.
that age, and we had one called the Alley Cats.
Okay.
And we used to jump roof to roof because the houses are very tight in Chicago. So you could actually jump roof to roof. And the initiation was to jump out of our second floor window on the ground without getting hurt. And then from there, you have to jump roof to roof. And, that's how we started. And it was really
Okay.
just a club.
Okay.
And then next thing you know, the block over got whiffed of their club. And then we end up meeting at a park and there was a fight. And when that fight happened, then there was constant fights
Mm,
every week. And then the older gang members started seeing it. So they started jumping it.
okay.
And one block will be a different gang. This block will be a different gang. So next thing you know, they recruiting for their
Mm,
real gang.
yeah.
And yeah, there was two big wars going on. And when I war, it was actually physically wars going on that are history, like it's in the books. And it was bad. So one of the gangs, I don't really like to mention their name. It was the ones that recruited us as a
Mhm.
kid. And it was, yeah, it was a drive-by shooting that ended up happening. I was around 11 years old and I went outside to go see what was going on. And at that time, like a lot of the gang members used to be like kids go inside. They was trying to protect the neighborhood in a way that
Mm,
was going on. But I was hard-headed and I didn't go back in and I went out and I ended up getting hit. The actual person that tackled me got hit too. It was like a ricochet off from a shotgun. So I
okay.
got hit in the shoulder, and the pellet stood in me for about 7 years. It I never told my parents; they never knew about it. I was
So
a
you
very
got shot and you never told anyone.
nobody knew for 7 years. Nobody knew. I covered it up. It was in the winter season, so I never really was wearing no shirt. I was always clothed, covered. And I remember my older brother was trying to get it out. And I couldn't take the tweezer going inside the arm. But the gang member that got hit, he took the biggest impact. He actually ended up becoming like limp on his left leg. And I still think that man to this day, man, because if it wasn't for him tackling me, who knows, I probably would have got killed. Because it wasn't as bad for me, but yeah, 7 years later, nobody really knew until one day I was working out and I didn't have my shirt on and I was doing curls. And what used to happen was the pellet from the shotgun was popping out and it created a home in my muscle. But when I would flex, it would pop out. And my parents seen it and they asked me what happened. And I finally spilled the beans. But I was a very quiet person. I didn't tell people about what was going on. I just kept my mouth shut because that was the mentality,
Hmm.
that the mindset that we got from the gangs was to
Keep your
be
mouth
quiet,
shut. Yep.
be
Don't say
quiet, don't
anything.
say nothing, or there'd be
So
repercussions. So we was
yeah,
shut.
there'd be consequences. Did you have it removed?
Yeah, actually, I was going to get a physical for high school and they removed it. And the doctor got happy. My mom, you need to get that thing out of your arm already. And it was starting to bug me. It
Mm.
was starting to like really hurt during the winter months. I don't know if you ever had a cavity and how that cavity aches. It was the
Yeah.
same feeling. It was like nails on a chalkboard. I can't that feeling like it was, and man, it was actually worse than they took it out because it was like they had to cut it like open and
Mm.
then go inside, and it was so deep into the muscle that they had to like, man, they kept shooting me with the anesthetics to like numb my pain because it was hurting a lot. And
Wow.
like when I got out of it, it looked like I got shot by a 45 because my whole entire arm was black and blue. And I still got the scar to this day. Like it would never go
Wow.
away.
Wow.
That's my tattoo.
Ah,
I don't have tattoos.
wow.
That's my tattoo.
Wow. What did you learn from that experience?
Oh man. I can say what I learned from that was every person grows up with a different card. They dealt
Mm,
with a different hand. It's like a poker game. What I could say is that experience didn't change me, but knowing that I went through that experience has changed me.
it's almost like you're seeing the good in it, or there is a silver lining of some sort?
It reminds me of when my grandfather went to World War II. Wasn't pretty going to the first invasion of Africa,
Mm,
but because I went through a similar battle, not like that type of battle, but a
mm,
similar battle, it really taught me, like, you know what? You got a bigger calling in life. You got a bigger purpose in life. And sometimes the things that you go through actually build a pathway to your future. And I've met a lot of people over the years that had similar things happen to them at young ages. Actually,
mhm.
when we moved, some of the guys that I was playing football with that grew up in hard neighborhoods as well, they also got shot at a young age. And we was some of the top athletes in the school because
Hmm.
of the stuff that we went through. We just fought harder to win because we knew that at one point we didn't, like, I know for me, I didn't think I was gonna make it past 21. After that had happened, my mindset was like 21, dude, I'm gonna be dead or in jail. And that was the mindset because of the gang activity and being minority in the area that I was in.
Mhm.
We was a statistic according to the news.
Yeah.
But my dad was really strong. He was a strong man. So he helped us shift that mindset. But I was one of those ones that was a little hard headed. I had to learn the hard way.
Yeah.
There was a lot of other stuff too that happened prior to that. At 5 years old, I got molested,
Mm.
and it was both sex that molested me too.
Wow. Oh my
One party
gosh.
girls, and one party a guy, a physical guy. And there was no family member. Like most, I think a lot of victims, a lot of it is family members. It was
Yeah.
actually babysitters. Because my
Wow.
mom wasn't present, we had some crazy babysitters at the time, and my dad was like working 3 shifts,
Oh,
trying to keep up with us and keep things going. So there was sometimes our aunts was babysitting us, our grandparents was babysitting us, but he had to hire some people at times. And man, those people is no good. They dropped us off in Cabrini Green projects. That's like a notorious project. That was like the first one that got tore down. Really, if you ever Google that, like, you ever seen the movie Candyman, the first one?
I
That's
haven't seen it.
Yeah, that's Cabrini Green. And I would never forget that day because you don't go inside there unless you live in that neighborhood. The cops don't even go there. They set the cars on fire. It's that bad. And they had us there. And they was like, I know, scoring some kind of drug, of course, because the next day when we got back home, he was trying to tell us to go upstairs. And I was like, nah, you ain't gonna tell me to go upstairs. It ain't my bedtime and you ain't my mom and dad. I was like being rebuttals. And then they was trying to tie us up and stuff like that. And like me and my older brother started fighting back, and we fought Ashley back. But that next, man, as soon as dad came home, we told him that lady was gone. But they did some bad things to us, particularly me. I'm not really sure about my older brother, but particularly me, they was doing some things that they shouldn't have been doing. And then it happened with the next door neighbor, with the girls. And that was a young age too. And that actually got called, like, it actually escalated to a school where it became a problem at school. And one of my friends told the principal what happened. And then my mom got a call, and I was so touched.
Mm.
I didn't say anything. And I knew that wasn't right. And I knew what was going on. And I did not say anything. And I wish I would have now, because I was holding that stuff inside for a very
Mhm.
long time.
Mhm.
If I would have been able to tell them what was going on, I think my parents, like my dad, would have been able to get us like some help early on. Because there is therapy that needs to be done on that. I never
Mhm.
took therapy for it. I went to forgiveness. I go to God as my counselor, and that's what healed me from it. And it really, what healed me from it was I went back to Chicago as an adult, and a good friend of mine, he came to my house and we was having some drinks and we was talking. And it turned out he ended up having the same thing happen to him.
With the same people?
Not the same people, but a different scenario, like a
Just
different
okay.
person. But he
Okay.
ended up getting molested too.
Mm.
And he had a hard time dealing with it because it was a family member.
Mm.
And I was like, dude, I went inside of my bedroom and I grabbed the Bible and he was asking me like, how am I able to like talk about this and be more comfortable and not have anger and all that. And I gave him the Bible and I'm like, man, this helped me. He's seriously, because I've always thought this wasn't going to help. I've always heard people talk about this. And I was like, nah, man, like this actually did help. And then I saw, I think it was about a week later after that, I saw a TEDx speaker come on and they was talking about that. And I knew one day when I saw that TEDx, I was like, you know what? That's going to be me one day. I'm going to be on a stage talking about my life experiences and it's going to help somebody that went through it. And it was actually, it gave me so much more disclosure because that was the first person that I opened up to about that scenario. The first person. And man, he actually read that book. And about 10 years later, he ended up messaging me on Facebook and showed me all the notes that he took. And he's, dude, man, this helped me so much. And I've finally been able to establish a relationship with my brother now because of it. If it wasn't for me opening up and being more vulnerable with a man about some of our past experiences, we was talking about like the gangs in Chicago, and that's how the conversation started because he was definitely heavily involved in that as well. Not anymore, but yeah. So like, you know, sometimes it's good to talk about your problems, especially with people that you could trust.
How did it feel that you were able to help him by sharing your own experience?
It created a long-term friend. Because of that, I got a friend for life. And that's the biggest gift from it.
Is there any correlation between the violence, the gangs, and that molestation, do you think? Is it part of that whole culture of the violence?
And I call it all sin.
Yeah.
I think Chicago's got a different beast. New York got a different beast. Chicago scene, think of Chicago, Al Capone. The gangster mentality was always there. So it was a culture thing. And especially like in Chicago, it's very segregated in neighborhoods of different race. I lived in the South and I lived in the North. There's a lot more races going on up North than there is down South, in my opinion, to be honest with you. And it was just a part of the culture. You had Tupac Shakur coming up at that time. Hip hop was just starting to start. Tupac gets killed. Now there's a war between East and West. We are right in the middle of it. We're in Illinois, but Chicago. And that was the culture. I know my dad's culture was a little different, like when he was growing up, because it was more mafia. And then like his older brother was definitely around the mob. They went to school with Al Capone nieces and nephews. It was an Italian neighborhood. So like we had more of that Italian structure, a family structure. That's what kept us like different from everybody else in the neighborhood. We kept up with our property. We was noble. We came from a noble table, loving family. A lot of these other kids didn't have that. And that's what I seen in my mom's side of the family. They didn't have that. They didn't have that family structure that was together. There was a lot of brokenness. And later on, I started seeing that there was a lot of trauma between alcohol abuse. Her father was an abusive alcoholic. So that caused trauma throughout their time growing up. Certain people got molested too, with family members on that side. And I didn't really hear none of that on my father's side. They was very protective of what was going on. They watched their kids. They really cared about them. On my mother's side, it was a lot of different things going on. A lot of alcohol abuse. I think that's where it starts. You're drinking so much, you're not really caring about your life. You're coming home being abusive. Not all drinking is bad. I think sometimes celebration was good because that's what my dad's family was about. They celebrated and it was family oriented and everybody was laughing and there was no fighting involved. But on her side, it was different. And there was a lot more gangs affiliation on her side. You know, I had cousins that was in jail before even graduating high school for murder.
Wow.
There was a lot of death going on, especially with the gang wars in the early 90s. Like Chicago's kind of out of control with the violence right now, but there was a lot more structure back then. So everything was organized. and they was fighting for the name. And that was the hardest part about in the early 90s, that they was actually fighting for the name, for that status. And yeah.
And that's how you survived.
Yeah, if it wasn't for the baseball, the basketball games, the activities, there was a lot of curriculums after school that kept us busy. The YMCA kept us busy. Dad actually was on us constantly. If it wasn't for that, oh man, especially like doing a divorce, we would have been lost. We would have definitely been lost. But I still had a lot of trauma from all of that. And when I went down to Texas, I brought that game banging mentality with me.
Okay.
And that was, that made high school hard.
Okay. Tell
That
us
made,
about that. So how was high school?
oh, high school wasn't the same for me like everyone else. I constantly got kicked out every year. I was going through metal detectors when I went to school. I was a leader of a gang that I created. Sad that I took that with me. But yeah, I was involved in a lot. And it all really started down to because I got jumped. It was my second day of school. I got jumped. I probably was the pretty boy. I was a kid that was a little different than everyone else. I walked different, talked different. So they didn't really like that. And then it just escalated from there. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to get a group of kids, a group of people that's going to back me up, because I'm not going to get jumped by 12 people no more. I'm not going to get jumped by 10 people no more. And at that time, like, you know, that gang banging mentality, and like I understood like military structure, I started my own, and it caused so much problems for me. I was constantly getting kicked out. If there was any kind of like issue in high school, they grabbed me out of school. They had me sit down, and detectives would talk to me. One thing I could say I did do though, I created a peace treaty with another gang that we was battling at the time. And it wasn't as devastating like in Chicago where there was like shooting going on. It did boil down to that one time. But we ended up making a peace. And I was one of the leaders, and there was another leader from the inner city of Dallas. And we got together and created a peace because it was actually getting ridiculous. We couldn't go to the movies. We couldn't go to anywhere without a fight breaking out. The principal actually got hit in a big, like it was a big Royal Rumble that started a riot in the high school, and the principal got hit. People got hurt. Girl got her ankle broken because it was like people getting trampled on. And yeah, it really cost me my baseball career. It cost me not being able to play football. And I was a really good athlete at that time. I could have easily been like my father played AAA ball. I could have been a high school champion just like him. And that was my dream. But I had started off with that mad mentality right when I came in. And it was really so hard to get out of. Even when there was a time where I got in Texas, they're pretty strict on you. And when it comes to fighting and stuff, in Chicago, they'll tap you on your hand and send you home. In Texas, they actually take you to court and you get a ticket and you got community service. And the judge was just so fed up with my behavior. And I had this rap sheet like this, and I'll never forget, they had me considered an aggressive Hispanic gang leader. And when I saw that, I was not happy. And I went to go see the judge, and they was like, do you have this much money to pay for these fees? And I said, no, I don't. And they looked at my parents, and my parents like I'm not a parent, but I could imagine a parent being like, oh no, this is already gonna cost me a lot of money. Now it's gonna cost me more money. So they just was like, you know what, Your Honor, this kid is out of control. We try to do everything we can with him. We brought him to the front door. He walks out the back. He doesn't even go to school. And there was reason for that. But man, the judge is like, in the state of Texas at 17 years old, you consider an adult. And I'm gonna teach you a hard lesson today. And she slammed the hammer. Boom. And that day I got cuffed for the first time in my life.
Wow.
And went to Dallas County. They put me in population. C cell tower. I don't like really remember. I remember that was the most scariest time in my life. My heart was beating the whole entire time going to that facility, and I was praying. And long story short, my father came to visit me, and it was like calling me, and I didn't know what was going on. I was really scared, and I was worried because I didn't know what was going on. I'm like, man, what's gonna happen? And then they're like, oh, you got a visitor list. You got to sign like who you want to visit you. And then I was like, I'm not going to be here that long. I'm like, who's going to visit me? So I just put my dad's name on there. Next thing you know, my dad, they was like, go to this place. And then they brought me into this building, and then my dad seen me. And man, it must have been a very hard thing for him because he never got involved in gangs. He never got in trouble. He was a baseball player. He was a pretty square type of guy. And I was sitting there, and he's like, why you didn't put your mother on that list? And I'm like, I can't like let my mom see me in here like this, especially seeing her family and what her family's been through, and some of her nephews been through and things like that, and some of her cousins. I didn't want to like also break down and cry because I had to be a little strong in there, or at least mask the fear and be like, I'm tough. Because I think that's what a lot of people do in there. And I could say I walked back out of there, and there was this big fight that broke out. And my dad was like, his eyes got this big, and I was like more alert to what was going on. And he's like, be careful in there, son. And I'm like, I'll do my best. We said a little prayer, and then I got out, and they opened up the tank, and there was like 40 people in this tank. And this big white guy, he was tattooed all over. And he told me, go talk to this guy over here. And he wasn't asking me, he was telling me.
Yes.
And I was like, okay, I'll go in there. And I knew a couple of these guys that was already establishing some kind of relationships, and just who I need to figure out who's the guy that I need to be friends with here. And I spoke my voice a couple times, but this man was sitting there with a Bible, and he was talking to this other guy. And that's what they called me to go do, is to go sit next to this man. And I'll never forget this story as long as I live. But he's, man, you're not supposed to be in here. This isn't you. You ain't designed for this. I don't know if you know that. And I know you're ashamed of being in here, but I want to show you something because I don't think nobody's done showed you this yet. And this has done help me. And he was explaining how he got in there and all this stuff. And he opened up the scripture, and it was about the potter and the wheel, and how he was putting the mud on the wheel, and he's turning the wheel, and he's forming the clay into a vase, a vessel. That vessel is you, actually, and you are the potter. And what's great about life is you can always look at what you've built with your hands and break it down and rebuild yourself all over again. And it hit me like a pound of bricks. I was like, man. And he's, you know what this means? That means right now you're looking yourself in the mirror, and you don't like where you at. You don't like what you've been doing. You don't like this scenario of where you're at. Remember, I did not like seeing that rap sheet this big. I did not like seeing being involved in gangs and being considered a leader, knowing that a lot of my trauma came from gang activity. And I was like, you're right. And he's, now it's time to take that mud, put new mud on top of that old mud, take that water and reform your new vessel. And that was when I seek forgiveness like I never had before. That was when I really found my relationship with God, was inside that jail cell. And I'll never forget that next day they called my name. There was no turning back. I got out of there, and I haven't been there since. And I completely changed. And I know the statistics when you go there, your life is going to be like changed and stuff. I didn't go back. Some people do go back. I didn't go back. And actually that summer we ended up moving to Louisiana. So I didn't complete my senior year, thank God, in Texas. I completed it in Louisiana. So I had a whole new clean slate, formed a new way of looking at life. And I got a little bit of that taste of what a clean slate and like forgiveness and like starting over was about, because when I was 12 years old, no, right before we moved to Texas, 12 years old, we was going constantly down there, and we was going to Louisiana, and my cousins, they knew about some of the stuff that I was doing, and they challenged me to this thing. And what they was doing was they was trying to find a way to give me something else to look up to and look forward to. And I was into Boy Scouts, and I loved fishing and stuff. And so like they challenged me to go out in the woods and do a survivor type of show out there. And I did the challenge, and I ended up staying out there for 3 weeks. So that did help me a lot during that time of when I had brought that game banging mentality to Texas. But I still was so far into it. So I had to fight my way out of it. It took really those 4 years to where I could like walk out or go to school or go through the neighborhood without hanging out with that crowd. And it really took that jail cell me with that one man. I don't remember that man's name, but
Wow. That's an incredible story. Your dad was trying to get you out of the neighborhood, but the neighborhood was in you so deep
and
that
you
it,
become a product of your own environment.
yeah, it took that of going to jail, but then you got the experience in nature. It's interesting that you say it took you 4 years, and people should understand that it's not a quick fix turning your life around. It does take time. And so you need to stick with it, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the best thing for me too was sometimes you just got to change your environment completely.
Yes.
I moved to the country my senior year in high school,
Yep.
and I adapt to the country like no one else thought I would have. I was, maybe because all the trauma that I
Mm,
was going through, like it was like, oh man, I don't got to worry about like walking to Camellos and having gangs approaching me. I don't have to worry about none of this. Like all I had was nature, and I was able to calm my mind down.
mhm.
And I embraced it, the beauty of just being out there and going out fishing. And then I picked up a new hobby, hunting. And to this day, I don't really tell people, hey, I'm from Chicago. I'm like from Louisiana, because
Mhm.
Louisiana is like, I could say like my hustle comes from Chicago, but my heart settles in the South,
Yeah.
in the country.
Yeah. I love that. So tell us about some of the profound things you learned from spending time in nature.
Ooh, it's when you become one with yourself, and when you understand that nature is bigger than you.
Mm,
You can't control when Mother Nature wants to take its course, just like life. You can't control what might come in front of you. But what you have to do is understand going through the storm. And I believe when I was in nature, I found myself. I found me facing my fears. I found myself in dark, very dark, in the darkness. And when I was in the darkness, what was I doing? I had a candlelight, and I was reading the Bible. I was journaling. I started picking up personal development books. I was really reflecting on my life. And I think that's the biggest thing that we have when we go to nature. We could reflect.
mhm.
We could take that pause, because the world could actually be a heavy weight. This last couple of weeks, I've been working a lot. I'm getting ready to self-publish a book here soon. So I went out and took a walk in nature. And when I got to an area where I knew, hey, I got a whole hour walk I could go, took off my boots, took off my socks, and I got
Mm.
grounded with
Oh
my
yeah.
bare feet. And you done that before, right? Like,
Yes, I do that all the time.
and I even found myself putting my back against a big oak tree. And it
Mm.
brought me back to that same place of when I was at the camp, and I was or underneath a willow tree, big willow tree. It was cool. They had
Yeah, I love willow trees. Love
white
willows.
Irish
Yeah.
moss, like Spanish moss dripping down.
Yes, they're beautiful.
Gorgeous. And I remember being there, and I remember that was the place I was able to get more connected to source, to something that was way bigger than me.
Yeah.
That's what I really got in nature. What it also taught me too, it taught me discipline. It taught me how to be humble on nature, especially when I was out there in the woods for that time. Like I had to get up and set my traps. I had to get up and make things and do things. Like if you own a home in the country, if you don't cut the grass, guess what happens? Grass keeps growing. And you'll always see some of those neighbors that don't have, you'll see those houses in the neighborhood or in the area that kind of run down. And most of the time when that happening, there's something going on in here, or they just don't care about themselves, where they're not taking care of it. And like when you're taking care of your things and you're doing things that are hard that you don't want to do all the time, but hey, you got to get it done. That's what I've really learned out in the woods. And it's a lot of people can't understand that. But like, man, try making it 1 or 3 days where you just got to eat what you could get.
Mm-hmm.
Like you got to get out there and get it, or Mother Nature would not reward you. And she didn't reward me for 4 days. You're going to have to put some sweat equity into this. And I'm going to reward you with all the fish you can eat, because we do live in this abundant life. But it helps you also appreciate the little things, the finer things. We get so caught up on materialistic things on earth that we don't appreciate what the Creator gave us. This ground, the trees, the fresh air, the sunsets. I think, especially after the pandemic, I was out in nature for 48 days. That's where I decided to do my quarantine. It was only supposed to be for 3 weeks, but I stood for 48 days. And also was doing a lot of mental challenging and personal development at that time. And what I could say is nothing was more healing than watching the sunrise and the sunset. And I seen 2 moon phases. That's more than 21 days of seeing full moon to a new moon. And being a part of all of that was the biggest healing component that you could possibly have. It's so healing. And being able to just sit back, lay your back down on the floor and not being scared of what could be out there in nature, and looking at the stars and just being with it, becoming one with it, becoming one with the land. And that's like one of my sayings, becoming one with the land. It's everybody needs to do it at least one time in their life. It's just go camping, go explore. I think if you live in a big city, and we all found that out during the pandemic, that we need plant life, we need nature. Once you start understanding that you are human and like your energy is good out there, all of a sudden nature starts coming out, the animals start coming out. You start seeing things you ain't never seen them in your life. I got a good trip I'm going on pretty soon. I'm going to, for my 2nd year anniversary as an entrepreneur, I'll be in Yellowstone. And it's going to be an awesome experience because I'm actually going on a hunt out there.
Okay.
I got some native roots, so there's a lot of, I'm going to be beating the drums.
Wow. So you're really getting in touch with it. I love that. Getting in touch with your ancestry, getting in touch with like Mother Earth. There's really nothing like it. It really brings all of us back to a common root, everyone, with all of our differences and all the shit that we fight about with the gangs, and just the regular people do an awful lot of that fighting too. But just remembering that common root and that nature could bring us there. That's pretty amazing.
Nature brings us home all the time.
Brings us right home. Yeah. Talking about your roots, I know you've mentioned to me in the past that you have some connection to some interesting historical figures. You know what I'm talking about?
My roots run deep. My roots run deep. My father's side's got a lot of history. They actually came from Spain and Italy and France. I think we're actually blood and mixture of all of that. Okay. We can't really track back too much, because when we got to the States at that time, we settled and was in Nacogdoches, Texas, twin city of Natchitoches, Louisiana, which is the oldest of the Louisiana Purchase. So we went back all the way to like the 1700s. My grandfather's name was Bennett. In French, we would say Benoit. He was a pistol packing cowboy that actually ran with Pancho Villa. They was war revolutionists. And he was one of those people that was like, there was bounty hunters. There was on a losing battle, but Benoit named all his kids after the James brothers. So Jesse James, Franklin James, Christopher James, all after outlaws. My grandfather was Jesse James. And we always found it very interesting too. Why would you name your kids after outlaws? But if you hear the whole folks stories a long time ago, Jesse James was the hero. Ford, who killed him, shot him in the back of his head, was considered a coward back then. Strong men a long time ago that was the asset. That was the muscle. Because a long time ago, if you didn't have strong men in your tribe or in your community, guess what happened? The other guys came in and they took over, and it was bad. I'm actually reading a lot about the history of that time frame now, because I'm going to be going out to those areas. But yeah, if it wasn't for these guys that was tough, they would have been able to go to school. The women would have been taken, and bad things would have been happening to them. So they had to have these guys, even though they was bad guys, they was considered bad men. And I don't know if he was robbing banks like Jesse James. He probably was running with him. Who knows? There's a big possibility. But I know he was with Pancho Villa, and we know Pancho Villa was a bad dude, good and bad at the same time. But I think there's always a bad wolf and a good wolf in everybody. Everybody has that. I think that's the battles that we have to face. I think that's the angel and the demons that we have to face. But I found it interesting because what we could track back is the time of when Jesse James Sr. was born. And he was in Nacogdoches, Texas, and then they migrated to Natchitoches, Louisiana. And they feel like two brothers that owned the town. They got in a fight, and then the other brother's like, you know what, I'm gonna go build me a town over here, and did the same thing, and that town actually became a lot bigger. And that was the one in Louisiana. Natchitoches is actually where we come from, Can't River. A very historical place. They made the movie The Still Magnolia there.
Okay.
Everybody knows that movie still. Yeah, beautiful historical area.
So I know that you became very successful as a fisherman, an angler. Tell us about that.
Oh man, I picked it up. I was fishing all my life, of course, even in Chicago. When I went back to Chicago as an adult, started fishing, and I really got into it. And then when I left Chicago, I went to Texas, and I was in the bar industry. I was in the nightclub scene. Good friend of mine, he was actually my neighbor. And I'll never forget this. He's, man, dude, like, I just want to go fishing. And I went into the closet and I grabbed this fishing pole, and we only had one, and we went out there and shared that rod and went fishing. And when we were sitting at Walmart, he was sitting down like a kid, and he was taking had all these lures, and we was buying some tackle. And I remember just sitting there, and he's, man, dude, like, when we was out there on the water, we got to figure out a way where we could do this and actually become like teach a man to fish, like type of thing, start a business doing this. And it stood with me for a long time because it was an extreme healing component for a lot of the people in the industry. We all had our problems, and just like everybody has their own shit they deal with. And that was a place that we could bring back those childhood memories. And there was some kids that didn't have that father figure in their life, grew up without fathers. So I was able to put that rod in their hand and teach them how to fish. And they caught their first bass, and it was an exciting experience. And all of a sudden, one day I actually manned up and created Hold Your Mouth. If it started off as a YouTube page, and then one day I started going viral, started really getting a lot of attraction there. So somebody told me, it was like, hey man, you need to look for some sponsors, and you need to get you in a league and go out there and get in a tournament. And I always thought, like, getting in a fishing tournament, you had to have a lot of money because you got to have this big boat and fancy stuff and all this good stuff like that. Kids that was more fortunate had or
Hmm.
privileged. And that wasn't the case. I had this strong mindset. I was like, I looked into it and I got in a league and got in some tournaments and I won my first tournament. I was up against, I think it was 126 people. And then everybody's, oh, that's beginner's luck. And then the next tournament I was in, I got first place again. And it was actually 136 people.
Wow.
Increased the
Hmm.
amount of people that was in there. And I got another feedback from people. Oh man, you got lucky, beginner's luck. You're getting lucky right now. I want to see you do it again. And I did it the third time back out. I felt the Chicago Bulls when they won their first three-peat. And remember, I was there in Chicago for all the 90s when they won. So I seen those championships and I was on fire.
Mm.
And what ended up happening is all of my friends in Texas that was watching this, they was all like, it inspired them to go out and teach other people to fish. And like, it created this whole movement during that time. And then the pandemic hits, boom.
Uh,
That was one of the things that was like, everybody was like more tuned into than all the other BS that was going on. So it was more even of a bigger healing component. But now I lost my fourth tournament, but then I win the fifth tournament. So now everybody's, wait, hold up a minute, dude. This kid is not just getting lucky now. And I remember even my own father was like, oh, dude, you can't do this, man. Because we got an in-law, like I got a stepsister and her son he's up there in the fishing community.
okay.
And he hit the professional level on the circuit. And I was like, I could do that too, man. If he could do it, I could do it. There's no difference between him to me. The only difference that he has is he came from a privileged background and they can afford the boat. And I had this John boat that I started off on, and I was smoking guys that had these expensive boats and expensive gadgets. And like, I really mastered my craft.
Hmm.
And that whole entire time during the pandemic, after I got out of the woods, all I did was fish
Mm.
day in and day night. And I read books and I studied.
Do you think your connection to nature allows you to be a better fisherman?
I think it has something to do with that because I believe energy and water is it is energy. And it's like a neutral, right? So when I'll get out on the water, I came with the mindset of Christ. And Christ would say, come out, when he told his disciples, come out on the water with me. You're fishing with me now. Don't,
Mm.
oh, we didn't fish any, we couldn't catch no fish. And no, you're coming out with me. So I came out with that mindset of him,
Mm.
that belief system of I'm going to fish. And also at that time, I was very positive about doing that because it was just so much joy there.
Yeah.
It didn't even matter if I didn't catch a fish. It was just joy. So all of that joy, all of that excitement, all that belief system, that mindset of knowing that if I go out there with that Christ energy, guess what happens? The fish just come.
The fish just come. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that whole idea of teaching other people how to fish and also learning yourself how to fish, that's really the essence of your whole life story. You've been learning how to fish your whole life.
Yeah, absolutely. The reason why I named my company Hold Your Mouth was that was a saying my grandfather used to say. And a lot of people think of hold your mouth like zip it,
Yeah.
but it doesn't really mean that. It actually it's laser focus. So
Mm.
laser focus where you're not allowing anything else to distract you. And it's being laser focused is what helped me get out of the trauma. It helped me changing my life around. It helped me actually get laser focused on becoming a fisherman. And
Mm-hmm.
then later on in life, when I've already taught people how to fish, I had to go fish for actual people now. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when I did the transition of putting my rod and reel down. And I knew my calling was a lot bigger. It's like the second scripture that stood with me a lot was when Jesus got his other disciple. his first disciples, and there was two fishermen. And he's, come follow me and I'll teach you how to be a fisherman of man. And when I became a life coach, my first clients were women that went through real hard domestic violence and narcissistic abuse. And I used to get out of those calls with them asking myself, why me? And later on, as I worked with them, I started realizing that a lot of the stuff that I've went through, they already had went through. And I had somehow felt I was healed. So I was able to heal them. I was like, wow, I got a bigger calling. And I'm no longer fishing for fish. I'm fishing for people that need hope, that need love, that need direction, that need guidance, that need a why, that need to find their purpose. And because I was so willing to dive into that industry, and I burnt the ship, I was ready to step in to entrepreneurship, and I burnt the ship, and there was no turning back. And that was the biggest decision I've ever made in my life, because those people that I was fishing for needed me the most. I was their circuit, and they was the plug. All they needed to do was plug into me and trust the process of what I was going to teach them through. And I was going to be on their side their whole entire way. I say better together. We are better together. That's one of my slogans. And I was that outlet. Some of them had kids. And because of all the stuff they went through, they self-sabotaged so much to a point where they were self-destructive. And I knew what self-destructive was. My mom was that. And I just being there for somebody and helping them, you have no idea what you're capable of. Now, because they were back in good health and they're out there doing what they could conquer in life, now their kids don't have to go through those problems. So I help support their family in a very big way.
Do you think that you are the person for them that you needed when you were growing up?
Man, I wish I would have had that. I wish I would have had that. I wish I would have found a person like me that came. Now, I did have it, but in different ways. My cousins, when they took me to the camp, introduced me to the woods.
So you did have you did have it, and then you were able to figure out how to be that for other people.
I had mentors growing up. I have always looked up to people, but I had to learn the harder way sometimes. But those lessons helped me, but
So what are the biggest lessons you've learned in your life?
Oh man, balance your emotions. I think as an entrepreneur, especially, you really find out that those emotions got to be checked. When you get too emotionally involved in something or a person or a thing and it doesn't go your way, it could hurt you. So you got to learn how to like shift that motion and turn it into something positive as fast as you can do it. I think the law of attraction really talks about that in a very good way. And another one, adaptability, is I think one of the biggest lessons that I've learned. Adapt to your surrounding. I think if I would have never adapt to the country, who knows what I would have been right now. I'm a big part of my life. I wear the bolo tie for a reason, to show people, hey, I'm like a cowboy, a little wild. This is to show, even if I'm in the city, I'm wearing this to show you, hey, there's a lot to me than just the city boy. So it's the adaptability, being able to be adapting to new changes. I think this is one of my biggest lessons that I've learned. And forgiveness. Forgiveness was the key component to everything. That's why I saved that one for the last. I forgive the gangs for doing what they did. I forgive the people that molested me. I forgive my mother for going through what she went through. I forgive even my father for just being there, but like also I think moving me out. There was times I was rebellious. I forgive, everything. I forgave myself for the things that I did, the harm that I've done to people.
Yeah.
And most importantly, you have to forgive yourself. And I forgive my enemies.
Yeah.
I made friends with them later on. So that forgiveness was the key, and it surrendering to that. I definitely, I have to practice it all the time, still to this day. I think we all do, but it removes those weights. And I really think it's really hard to exceed in life if you're carrying around a bunch of baggage, if you're carrying around weight, if you continue to keep looking in the past. And I think that's another good lesson too, is like when that's what forgiveness does. It helps you not look in that rear view mirror no more. It helps you be more present to what's in front of you, because that's where you have more control over. We don't have control over what happened in the past. We just got what we could control.
You have to take the
No.
lessons so that you can change and be the best you can in the present.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. What about your blessings? What are your biggest blessings?
Actually, one of the biggest blessings is going through all this. It's part of a unique story, a career path
Mm,
that is done shape my character to the man that I want to be.
mm,
It's another blessing is my family, because they get to see all this.
yeah.
Put me here. My mom, my dad for putting me here. Like I'm one of those guys. Like I still keep my parents' wedding picture on the wall.
Aw,
Because
yeah.
that's without them, I wouldn't even be here. Probably the other biggest blessing too is my three cousins, MJ, Mark, and Philip, for bringing me out there into the woods and introducing me to the land.
Hmm.
Um, Probably one of the biggest things that impacted my life.
Yeah. Changed your
Um,
life.
and also being able to meet people like you and collaborating and being around a community of people that has the like-minded belief of, hey, let's tell our story,
Yeah.
because this is going to heal us. And
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest blessing. That's why I like this podcast like meant the most to me, because I know this is like a very touching
Yeah.
subject.
Yeah.
It's hitting you in the core of real life scenarios, and we all go through it. And it's a blessing to be able to stand in my truth without masking, no problems, and being just straight, completely honest. And you never know. It might just help one person, or it might help 1,000. Who knows? Maybe
Exactly.
that one person that it does help becomes that person that helps 1,000,000.
That's
Well, guess
right.
you created that domino effect. You
Yeah.
created that spark in that fire.
Yeah.
You started that fire. The logs on it now.
Yeah, that's right. Let's keep putting those logs on the fire. Last question. And if you can try to answer in just one word or a couple of words, what is the most important thing?
Love.
I have to admit, that's my favorite answer. Thank you so much, Alex. Oh my gosh, such a great conversation. Thank you for being so vulnerable. I know you are going to start that fire out there and that you're already doing it. It's already smoldering with the people that you're helping in your life and that you're with sharing your story and helping. So thank you again. It was great talking with you.
A pleasure. Thank you for having me as well.
Okay.